All right, let's see how far we can get today. This is Fairbanks, Alaska, Monday, May the 14th, 2012, trial by jury, day 5. Anchorage, Alaska, Monday, May 14th, 2012. All right. The court, please be seated. Oh, they sworn in the witness. Hold on. Let's slam roll. The government calls ATF Special Agent Andrew Ashton. If you'll stand in the witness box there and face the jury in the courtroom and raise your right hand and to be sworn, Andrew Ashton, plaintiff's witness, sworn. I do. Thank you. Please be seated. Direct examination. Miss Lamro. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. If you could please state your name for the record and spell your last name. Andrew Ashton, A-S-T-H-T-O-N. Mr. Ashton, where do you work? I work for the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives, National Firearms Act Branch. And where is that located? It's located in Martinburg, West Virginia. I think our whole freaking country works for the government now. Spying on, half of us are spying on the other half. How long have you been working for the ATF? I started in 2005 as an ATF examiner, and then in 2010 I was promoted to an ATF specialist in the National Firearms Act Branch. Can you explain what an examiner does? Yes, the applications, whether it be an application that somebody is making, an NFA item, a National Firearms Act item, or whether they're getting in an item transferred to or from them, and an examiner would see this paperwork and they would review it and ensure that everything's been met. All the qualifications have been met, and then at that point they would approve it. And if it hasn't been met, then they would take steps to get the application approved. So it could be approved. And then if the person refused to do what needed to be done, then they would disapprove the application. And so you worked as an examiner for about 5 years. Is that right? That's correct. And then in 2010, you said you became a specialist. Yes. Can you explain to me what a specialist does? My current job is to go into what is called the National Firearms Database. I go in and I retrieve data based on information that is given to me from the ATF agents throughout the country. They'll give me what's called a record search request. And with that request, there will be names. There might be a social security numbers. There might be dates of birth. And there might be serial numbers. And I take that information and I put it into a database. I use wildcards while I'm doing that. So, you know, I just not putting in a person's name in. I'm putting in parts of the person's name in to try to pull back as much information as I can. Then I sift through it to see if that person has anything registered to them. And when you talked about an NFA database, yes, NFA refers to what again? The National Firearms Act of 1934 is what NFA stands for. And the database itself is the National Firearms Transfer and Record System. Registration and yes, transfer record. Yes, what do you refer to it as normally? The NFRTR? It's a mouthful. Yeah, but that's what we call it. And so when you talked about the way you can run searches in this database, you used the term wildcard. Yes. Can you explain to the jury about what you mean by that? Yes, we use percent signs, and a percent sign allows you to bring things that would be before and after. So, you know, for example, my last name is ASH. I could put a percent sign before and after, and a percent sign after, and it would bring everything that would have ASH in it for the first name. For a last name, you could do that in any of the fields. So the purpose of using the wildcard is to make sure your search is expansive. This is crazy that these freaking government idiots are allowed to get on the stand and like give educational classes to the jury, like, you know, on the most stupidest stuff ever. And what it does is it sets up a air of legitimacy on what they're doing. How come the defense can't get up witnesses? I guarantee you, if the defense puts up a witness and starts treating them in this fashion, the judge would shut it down in a heartbeat. They shouldn't be allowed to go through all this crap, man. So the purpose of using the wild card is to make sure your search is expansive. Yeah, that way it encompasses every possible possibility to bring back information and retrieve it. And what exactly is stored in that database? There's any form that, and we have in the National Firearms Act branch, and we receive is stored in that database. So there's forms, you know, if someone applies to make a firearm, for example, yes, is that going to be kept in the database? Yes, absolutely. If someone registers a firearm, is that going to be kept in the database? Absolutely. If someone transfers a firearm, is that going to be kept in the database? Yes. Now, we've been talking about firearms. Is this a database of all firearms? No, just the firearms that were covered under the National Firearms Act of 1934. And those firearms Is that a database of all firearms? No, just the firearms that are covered under the National Firearms Act of 1934, and those firearms are machine guns, short-barreled rifles, short-barreled shotguns, any other weapons, silencers, destructive devices. Okay, so the registration that you're talking about, the database you're referring to, only stores information regarding those items, right? Yes, that's correct. There's no national database of every single firearm. That's correct. We do not cover anything other than the firearms that are covered under the National Firearms Act. The records that you're referring to those regularly made and preserved as part of the ATF and your agency's work, yes, everything that we get in, it would be filmed and eventually it goes into a retrieval system. And you mentioned the NFA includes the firearms, includes the silencer. Is that correct? Yeah. A silencer is considered a firearm? Yes, under the National Firearms Act, that's correct. A silencer is considered a firearm. What about a semi-automatic gun? Is that considered a firearm? If it would be classified as a short-barreled rifle or a short-barreled shotgun, specifically a short-barreled rifle, then yes. But if it wasn't short-barreled, would there be any reason that it had to be registered? No. It would need to be classified, under one of the 6 classifications for the National Firearms Act to be in our database. Now, you talked about machine guns, correct? Is there something special about machine guns that have to be registered? Well, they're part of the 6 that they have to be registered under the National Firearms Act, but specifically those machine guns after May the 19th, 1986 cannot be made by individuals. You're saying machine gun. Are you referring to fully automatic machine guns? Yes, absolutely. That's the only requirement. When it comes to machine guns, in your world, it's only referring to fully automatic machine guns, yes. And what about destructive devices? You said those are included? Absolutely, yes. And if someone has a federal firearms license, do they still have to register those firearms with you? Yes, they do. What if someone submits an application to make a firearm and it's not approved? Is that record kept in your database? Yes. It would be, because that would be a record that we would disapprove, and the record would also be stored in the database so we could retrieve that information. So regardless of whether the application was approved or disapproved, it's still that record of the application having been submitted is. So maintained in your database? Absolutely. If it makes it to our branch, it'll get entered into our database, and then we'll take some kind of action on it. Are you familiar with the registration process? Yes. I'd like to show you that we have identified as Government Exhibit 477, and that should appear on your screen. And before you go into too much detail, I'd just like to inquire whether you recognize that item, and if you could just briefly describe it, please. Yes, Government Exhibit 444 is our application to make and register a firearm. It's called an ATF Form 1. The specific form number 5320.1, and this application would allow individuals to make National Firearms Act items. Okay, let me stop you there. And I'll go ahead and offer Exhibit 477. No objection, 477 admitted. If we could have the lights, Madam Clerk, can you again describe what's the title of this document, Government Exhibit 477? Application to make and register a firearm. Now again, when the term firearm appears here, what is that referring to? That's referring to any firearm that falls into the classification of the National Firearms Act. The 6 classifications? Yes. You listed, so in other words, you could read it as an application to make and register a silencer? Yes. Or application to make and register a machine gun. Machine guns have more restrictions on them, so individuals can't make machine guns. Okay. After May the 19th, 1986. Okay, we'll get to that. So and similarly, it could be read as an application make and register a destructive device. Yes. Okay, now if you're looking at this form, it says in the 2 column at the top, it says National Firearms Branch. Is that correct? Yes. So that's where the application actually gets submitted to you in, yes, West Virginia, yes. What is the paragraph 3B here for? That is where the applicant would put their name and their address, okay? And then if we could scroll down to 4, what is that for? That would be where the applicant put their name and address, again, because they would be the manufacturer or the silencer. Because this is an application to make a firearm, yes, and then in subparagraph B, there under 4B, it says, type of firearm to be made. Yes, and that would be specific to what they are trying to make. So if they're trying to make a silencer, it would say silencer. And then in paragraph 4I, it says, state why you intend to make the firearm. That's also for the applicant to fill in with the application. Yes, okay, that's correct. And then if you scroll down to paragraph 7, then you there's a spot on the application to sign, correct, and form. And then below that is an area for ATF, yes. That section is where we would approve or disapprove. And then where it says authorized ATF official, the name of the examiner would go there, and then the name of the supervisor would go after that, and then the date. Let's go to the next page at the top. How many pages? Is the actual application. The actual application with instructions is 4 pages long. Okay, so we're on the second page here, and at the top it says additional requirements, correct. There's paragraph 10, and there's some questions there for the applicant to answer. Is that right? Yeah, that's correct. Okay, so what is question 10b, a fugitive from justice? And what's your understanding of there's an answer yes or no, answer any of these questions? If any of those would be answered yes, that would be a disqualifier to manufacture an NFA firearm. So the applicant would be disapproved by the ATF, yes. So there's other questions here asking about prior convictions. Yes, and then 11D, there's a question. What's that question? Renounced your United States citizenship. And then what's question E? Been convicted of any court or misdemeanor crime of domestic violence. And then below in paragraph 13, it looks like it's called law enforcement certification. That's correct. Now, what is this certification? This would be where you would have to go to your local sheriff or your local chief of police. We call it the chief law enforcement officer in your area. Some areas have both a sheriff and a chief of police, so either of those would be okay. But you are expected to get the chief of police or the sheriff in your area, not to go to another county. So if you live in a specific county, the sheriff of your county needs to sign this, and we do verify the names that are signed here, that are current sheriffs or current chiefs of police. And what is the current paragraph? What is the paragraph above the signature line there for the law enforcement certification? Can you read that? Where it says, I have no information indicating that the maker will use the firearm as described device on this application for other than lawful purposes. I have no information that possession of the firearm described in item 4 on the front of this form would place the maker in violation of state or local law. And then if we scroll down lower to that page, there's information for currently registered firearms. Is that correct? Is that right? And then part where it says important information, is that that all part of the same form? Yes. And then if we go to the next page of the application, there is some definitions and instructions there for the applicant, correct? If we look at the definition section, so for example on the left hand side 1C, yes, and that's where the applicant sees the definition of firearm, yes, and those are the 6. Well, it looks like 8 classifications that you referred to earlier. Yeah, because some of those classifications, 2 of them fall into the classification of any other weapon. When you're making a gun from a short-barreled rifle or a short-barreled shotgun, those fall into the any other weapon classification. Lost my spot here, hold on. Okay, and then if you scroll down to I, that's where you have the definition of make. And then if you go to the next page, there's more instructions there with the form. Is that right? Correct. Can you describe some of the categories there on the instructions? Well, the one that comes out there, it's machine gun. You can make that, and it talks about where you can't make a machine gun anymore. Now this is the form too. If somebody wants to make a silencer or destructive device or a machine gun, right? Correct. What if somebody wants to buy one? They don't want to make it. They want to buy it. Yes. What form do they fill out? That would be the ATF Form 4, which is known as 5320.4. Let me go ahead and show you what we've identified as Government Exhibit 478. Do you have that up there? Yes, I do. And just briefly for the record, do you recognize that? Yeah, I do, yes. Is that the form you were just referring to? Yes, it is. Ms. Lamro, the government offers Government Exhibit 478. No objection, no objection, no objection. It may be admitted. 478 admitted. If we go ahead and show that to the jury, great, thank you. Now this at the top, it's called an application for tax paid transfer and registration of firearm. That's correct. And again, when we see the word firearm here, is that referring to all guns? No, that's referring to any and all the firearms that are classified under the National Firearms Act of 1934. Okay, so if somebody wants to buy a silencer or buy a destructive device or a machine gun, this is the form they fill out, correct? Okay, let's go to the top there, the first paragraph 2A, and it says transferee's name, and there's a section for the transferee's name. So correct. What is that? What is that? The transferee would be the current owner and the seller of the firearm, and the transferee would be the buyer of the firearm. And this is working. This assumes that the item is already registered and in your database. Yes, it would have to be registered in order to be transferred on an ATF Form 4. And then if we scroll down to paragraph 4, that what are those columns for? That would be where the name of the manufacturer, the item would be the type of item, the model, any if it has a barrel length, an overall length, serial number, caliber, all that would be filled out. And what would be filled out by the original manufacturer? Well, it would be filled out by the information that would be from the original manufacturer of the item. I see there's a place here for the transferee's federal license, if any, and then below the paragraph 7 it says transferee's federal license, if any. Yes. Does that mean if any of you have any of the federal firearms license, you still have to fill out this form? Yes. Okay, and if we go scroll down, please, then there's a signature line for the transfer. Is that right? Yes. And then the bottom section again, is that the section that the examiner would use, and they would use that to either approve or disapprove the application? Again, if we go to the next page of the application, the top section is called transfer information, correct? And those are the same questions that we saw on the last form, yes. And what's your understanding if the answer is to any of these questions? Then the application would be denied, disapproved. Okay, we're on page 21, and I got to take a break. And again, there's a transferee certification similar to the last form. Yes, paragraph 15. Paragraph 15 there, that's correct. And this is the transferees to sign, is that right? Correct. And and what is the bottom statement says? My possession of the device or weapon would be consistent with public safety. Yes, that's something that the transferee has to swear to. Yes, and then if we scroll down, there's a law enforcement certification again. Yeah, correct. Is this the same process that you described with the last application? Yes, it is. So the chief law enforcement officer would have to sign the application. Yes, he would. And what are the two sentences regarding certification? I have no information. I have no information indicating that transferee will use the firearm or device described on this application for other than lawful purposes. I have no information that the receipt or possession of the firearm or device described in item 4 would place the transferee in violation of state or local law. And then if we could throw down, there's another section similar to the last form where important information for currently, yes, registering firearm. And then if we turn to the next page, there is more instructions similar to the last form, yes, with the definition of a firearm. That's correct. And if we go to the next page, there are more instructions regarding the application. So, yes, this is something that you were familiar with when you were an examiner. Is that right? Yeah. So this is something that you, I approved thousands of Forms 1s and Forms 4 as an examiner. Do you have a sense of approximately how many pending applications there are right now at the ATF? We currently have over 30,000 pending applications. So is there a wait time, a lag if you want to make a purchase, a registered firearm? Yeah, that's about a 7-month wait time right now. Turning back to the NFA database, yeah, you're referring to. Let's turn back to the database after we take a break. We'll take about 50 minutes. All rise. Let's take 10 and deal with the other matter. The matter stands in recess for 10 minutes. All rise. It's honor the United States Court is again in session. Please be seated. Okay, what's the deal? Here was somebody, some witness. Well, Your Honor, I anticipate the government is going to call Ching. Yes, investigator Ching is to testify about items taken pursuant to search warrant of Ken Thessing's home. We've sent Ken Thessing's name and number of documents. However, it is my understanding that Mr. Thessing is not on the witness list, nor is it listed as an unindicted co-conspirator. Number one, I don't see the relevance of any documents that might have to come from his home. And number two, I think there's a confrontation problem because there's no one for me to cross about the meaning of the documents and why he has them or how long he's even had them or if he knew he had them. So I have a problem with the whole line of questioning. Scrocky, here's what we have, Judge, from the search of Mr. Thessing's residence. We have some photos of the buses where he lived, of the bus where he lived. We have an AK-47 with a double mags tapped to it, body armor, a flak vest, an iPhone, which I'll get to, Liberty Bell cards, common law trial information off the wall calendar in the bus. He was arrested with a pistol and he's armed. We have a computer from a search of his residence, which is a photo, which I'll get to in a moment, a box of tactical gear, similar to the numbers of tactical gear you see here already with the body armor and the plates. And the thing that Mr. Thessing is, on February 12th, the 241 meeting was held on that bus. A member of the militia on the wall in that bus, he had an APM on-call status board with a list of phone numbers, including all the defendants here, and on his number, the forensic individuals, the forensic lab folks pulled off a photo of Lonnie Vernon, which we tried to admit this morning, Exhibit 811-812, carrying at 223, which was the subject of the testimony here early in the afternoon, which was taken by Mr. Thessing at KJNP on November 23rd of 2010, which is directly relevant to the 924C course count against Mr. Vernon, as well as the conspiracy to commit murder against federal officials. He is, therefore, to a great extent, an unindicted co-conspiracy. He's not on our witness list. If they want to call him, they can call him, but these things are not testimonial to his part. They're basic physical evidence of an individual who fostered, facilitated, coordinated, and helped these men hold a meeting where they planned to kill state officials and talked about it at length. We have witnesses who will talk about the connection between Mr. Cox and Mr. Thessing. Mr. Cox also tasked Mr. Thessing with helping him out with various matters over at the state court. Mr. Thessing showed up there. Mr. Thessing appeared in a color photo newspaper article we're going to show with him as a militia member with the defendant Cox and Barney, another individual who is on our witness list and who will testify. So based on those factors alone, and there are more, we feel this evidence is very relevant, should be admitted. Your Honor, first of all, the picture that the government is referring to, we didn't know that. That was taken by Mr. Thesson. Mr. Thesson's not here to tell us whether he took the picture or not. It may well appear on his computer. I don't know. It's not in evidence, right? For that reason, it hasn't been identified. It could have been a Halloween party for all I know anyway. Miss Hayden and I just don't. Go ahead. See how Mr. Thesson owning a firearm, having a meeting in his home plays into conspiracy. Furthermore, if the government's going to characterize him as an unindicted co-conspirator, I don't know how much good it would do for us to call him as a witness, because he would probably have the Fifth Amendment privileges. Well, all witnesses have that. Well, if he's unindicted co-conspirator, he might want to use it. Well, he might. I'm not sure I know what to tell you. It seems to me that the path we've gone down is not limited to the conspiracy, to the alleged conspirators, but part of what they are alleged to have been involved in is the involvement in the militia group, not all of a sudden, over the last 5 days, we have a whole lot of evidence about a whole lot of people and a whole lot of things that may not be directly in this specific conspiracy here charged. But there are those items of evidence, and the names, so forth, are relevant to the broader picture of what was going on. And I don't know. I don't think you can draw the line at who is named unindicted co-conspirator. I don't want to expand beyond reason, obviously, and waste a lot of time. But there are a lot of members of the militia group that are relevant to the issues in this case we're trying. It seems to me, and I think you do not have a right to cross-examine unless there is some fact evidence offered by would require some response. The discovery of a document or an item, if the document's not hearsay or something like that, why, it's just discovered where it's discovered, and the jury can decide what to make of it. So I guess my reaction to that is, you can call him if you want. You can make your objections as we go along, and I don't see that I should issue some blanket order in regard to this guy's what was found in the possession, or for that matter, what he might say if he comes to court. He's not one of these witnesses that you've got hidden somewhere or anything like that, I trust. Okay, I guess that was a motion in limine. Well, that will be denied. Again, let me remind you, that doesn't mean that any particular thing is admissible, but I'm not going to rule in advance. All right, where's our witness? Let's get to the jury and make some hay. I might tell you also, I have a request for a short day on the 30th because of the induction of your new circuit judge up here and attendant problems, and I will discuss that with the marshals, and we'll talk about that too. We may end up with a short day, and that's a short week with Memorial Day, and so I'll have to figure that out and make up the time as best we can. At the risk of being beheaded, I would suggest that we're a little behind in our plan for witnesses. Hurry up then. We would object to a Friday at some point, but I'm just throwing that out there, Judge. Yeah, we'll see. All right, please be seated. Direct examination continued. Miss Lamro, good afternoon. Ashton, direct. Turning now to your role, the ATF specialist regarding searches run in the NFA database by the NFRTR, as you referred to it. You did conduct a search to determine whether Schaefer Cox had any firearms registered to him. I did. Let me go ahead and show you what's exhibit identification as government exhibit 450. If you could just look at 450, please let me know if you recognize the item. I do. Did you prepare that? I did. Can you just briefly describe what it is? Yeah, when I conduct a search in our database to see if somebody has any items that would be in the database, once we have our results, and we make something that's called a certification. Sorry, don't show it to the jury yet. Sure, just this is your certification? Yes, from your search, yes. Offers exhibit 450, no objection times 3. It may be admitted 450 minutes. Lamro, now you can show it to the jury. It's a certification. It's 2 pages. The front page is, it has the ribbon on it, but the second page is what has the information on it, and I state the name that I searched, and there was nothing found under any firearms in the National Firearms Database. Okay, and let me turn first to the first page you're referring to. If we could have the lights, Madam Clerk. This is the top right corner. What's the title of this document? Court Certificate Qualification Cover Sheet. Okay, and is this the standard? Yeah, cover sheet. Yes, it is. The only thing that changes would be the name of the specialist, and in this case, it's my name. How many specialists are there? We have 6 specialists currently. Okay, let's turn to the next page. The page you were explaining refers to the actual search that you ran in the database. Yeah. And depending on what information I've been given, I would input the information into this page, and I was given the name, and that's what I searched by, and I conducted my search, and I was given a negative search. It did not bring back any results, and that's where I put down any firearms. So any firearms refers to any firearms that would be covered under the National Firearms Act. So when you say any firearms, you're referring to that column, one there where it says any firearms, and we don't need to blow it up. Is that what you're referring to? Yeah, and When you say firearms, that includes silencers? Yes, that would include any of the 6 categories. Machine guns? Yes. Destructive devices? Correct. And that now there's a sentence right before the column that says, I found no approved application. That's correct. And Francis August Schaefer Cox to make and register said firearms. So did your research also encompass a search of whether any application had ever been submitted to the ATF? Yes. And had any application ever been submitted? No. I'll now have you look at what's marked for identification purposes 454. Okay. And did you recognize that? I do. And this is related to the search that you ran in the database? Yes, it is. Lamoureux, the government exhibits 454, no objection times 3, it may be admitted. 454 admitted. If you could go now and look ahead and look at the government exhibit 454, okay, and then what is this document? This is again in the certification that I would conduct. I would complete upon conducting a search for that name. That would be on the second page of this document. Let's turn to the second page. What is the name? The name is Coleman Lee Barney, and so you ran a search for him in the NFA database. I did. And what was the result of your search? That I did not find any firearms registered to him in the National Firearms Database. And again, firearms includes the 6 classifications you discussed. Yes. And what about any applications? No, I did not find any application at all that would have matched Coleman Lee Barney. And when we talk about the searches that you ran for Francis August Schaefer Cox and for Coleman Lee Barney, did you run variations of their names in your search? I did. We don't assume anything, maybe the person's name would have been Lee instead of Coleman for their first name, so we would run all those names and not just the complete name. We would run parts of those names, all in first name, all in the last name category that our database allows us to search. So in regards to your search for Francis August Schaefer Cox and for Coleman Lee Barney, I did. Let me go ahead and show you what's marked for identification. You should have there on Exhibit 459. Yes. Did you recognize that item? I do. It's a certification that you prepared. It is. Ms. Lamoureux, the government now offers Exhibit 459, no objection times 3, 459 admitted. Ms. Lamoureux, did you search or determine whether Lonnie Vernon and firearms registered to him? I did. And what was the result of that search? It was a negative result. So if we turn to look at 459, what are you looking at here? This is where the cover sheet where I would produce the court certification cover sheet. And then we turn to the next page. What does that tell you? That would tell you that I ran the name of Lonnie Jean Vernon, and I did not find any applications that would refer to the firearms and that he owned and that would be registered with the National Firearms Act branch. So no firearms registered to him. No, not under the National Firearms Act branch, no. And no application submitted to the F. That's correct. I have no other questions for this witness. Dooley, we're going to do it out of order, Your Honor. Yeah, right. Cross-examination, Dooley. Special Ashton, I'm Tim Dooley. I'm representing Coleman Barney over there. It sounds like there's registrations and registrations in a sense, correct? We have a registration. Lamoureux, objection, Your Honor. What was that a question? Is that a question? Is that an objection? It was my idea. Mr. Dooley, let me ask you to rephrase your question. All right. Mr. Dooley, the National Firearms Act registration process only applies to a very narrow set of firearms, correct? Yes. The machine guns, the silencers, the sawed-off shotgun, the sawed-off rifle, destructive devices, correct? Yes. Any other weapons also? When a person goes into a store and buys a handgun, a shotgun, a rifle, that is not required to be registered with the National Firearms Registry. That's correct. In fact, what happens is this. They fill out a form, and I've shown you the Defense Counsel CB for Coleman Barney. Yes. Can you identify that for us? This form says it's an ATF form 4473530.9 Part 1. Could you look at each page and see if it looks accurate to you? It possibly could. We don't deal with the 4473 form in the National Firearms Registry. So my familiarity is just something that I've seen along the way. All right, but I bet you know more than most folks. When you buy a gun at the store, this is the form that you fill out, correct? If you're buying a firearm that's not classified under the National Firearms Act branch, it is right, like a pistol, shotgun, or rifle, correct? And will you give me the number of the exhibit again? It's okay, as in a hotel. All right, thank you, CB-H. And the dealer keeps this for 20 years. Yes, he does. It's not going to going to any national database. No, upon him being in business. When the dealer goes out of business, they are required to send the records into the National Tracing Center. All right. Only for a 20-year period, though? Got you. How many silencers do you reckon are registered in the National Firearms Database? I don't have an exact number. I do know we have over 3.5 million records total in our database, and that number is growing exponentially every day. If you go to the gun show and you see a table full of silencers, you would have to fill out, well, go to a Class 3 dealer. You may find one like you go to Class 3 dealer, correct? Yes, Ms. Lamoureux. Objection, foundation. I'm not sure what the witness is familiar with the Class 3. The court, he can tell us if he doesn't understand. Dooley. There, I know that there are different classifications of, firearm dealers, and it depends on what type of licenses that they have. You're starting to get out of my zone of where I know what, my job. Now that you go to Class 3 dealer and you fill out an application with him, correct? Yes. And this gets sent to the ATF to you guys? Yes. The Form 4 at that point would be what would be right. Submitted to the ATF, yes. And then they wait 7 or 8 months, pay a $200 tax. A $200 tax for anything except for any other weapons, which are a $5 tax. $5, okay. And then if you all approved it, it would be mailed back to the dealer, and the dealer would give the fellow his silencer. That's correct. Duly. Mr. Robinson, can I impose your view for 478002? Do you have that in front of you on your screen? I think yes. And it's been admitted. And could we expand the boxes of questions that are up there if you don't mind? And I get rid of that by pushing. Now, if one of our people filled this form out and they answered no to every question, one of these questions, if they answered no to every one of these questions, at least so far they'd be doing pretty good as far as, yes, that'd be getting it registered. One of the sections of the requirements to complete a process, yes. Okay, and let's move to the admission of CB-8 so I can chat about it. I'm going to object, Your Honor. Let me show you what I'm moving, Judge. I think it may be admitted. CBH into evidence. Okay, duly, thank you. And I have plenty. I'll get it later. Now, I think I'm up there. There we go. Boy, you get seasick if you move it around, don't you? Mr. Dooley. This is the form the people are accustomed to filling out when they buy a pistol or a shotgun or a rifle, correct? Yes. And they simply check off very much the same questions that they were asked in Exhibit 478, which was the ATF form previously admitted for purchasing, say, silencer, inaudible reply. All right. That covers my questions. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you. The court, Ms. Hayden, no questions, Your Honor. Traverso, no questions. Lamoureux, thank you, Thank you, Your Honor. Redirect examination by Ms. Lamoureux. I want to follow up on a couple of questions, Mr. Dooley, and now I'm on page 41. I want to follow up on a couple of questions. Mr. Dooley asked if the question on the transferee information with the questions with the yes or no boxes, and he asked you whether if the answer was no to all those items and the item would be approved. Do you remember him asking you that? Yes. Mr. Dooley, not quite that. He asked you what would happen if there would be a no for every of those answers, right? Yeah. And there would be other questions in the form where the applicant is supposed to provide information. Is that right? Yeah. If we can pull up Exhibit 478, please. And again, this is which form? This is an ATF Form 45320.4. So it's for the transfer of, yes, something that's already been registered, yes. And on the first page they're supposed to indicate the type of firearm, correct? And there's a similar section of the application to make a firearm. Is that right? Yes. And is there a section where you're supposed to indicate why you're making it? Yes. And is that something that sometimes raises questions? Yes. If somebody would put something in there that would be what would be considered out of the norm, then we would question it. And it could be approved or disapproved. It just varies. Yes. What if both of those forms had a law enforcement certification section? Okay. Is that right? Yes. What happens if there is no law enforcement certification? We would send the application back asking the person go get the section completed, giving them 30 days to do that, and return the application to us, and then we would go on with the application process. And if you never received the law enforcement certification, then what would happen? Then we would disapprove the application. No other questions. Thank you, Mr. Ashton. You may be excused. The witness, thank you. That's the end of that.